Lucy thought for a while, her mind racing through the many objects she owned. Her house was filled with antiques and unique items, each with its own story. She looked at Walter, her curiosity piqued. "What kind of object are we talking about?" she asked, trying to get more details. Walter took another sip of his tea. "It's an old object, likely with sentimental value. It should have a number engraved or written on it. The number is part of a 3-part code that I need to complete my mission." Lucy's eyes widened slightly. "A code? What mission could require such a code?" Walter shook his head gently. "I'm afraid I can't tell you more than that. But it's very important, and I believe you hold one part of it." Lucy stood up and walked over to a large cabinet filled with keepsakes and heirlooms. She opened the doors and started examining the contents. Walter watched her carefully, his expression hopeful. "I have many old objects here," she said, pulling out a small wooden box. "This belonged to my grandmother. She always said it was special, but I never really understood why." Lucy opened the box, and inside was a delicate locket. She handed it to Walter, who inspected it closely. On the back of the locket there was a number, 5. "This could be it," Walter said, looking at Lucy. "Do you know anything more about this locket?" Lucy shook her head. "Just that my grandmother treasured it. She never explained why." Walter smiled and handed the locket back to Lucy. "Thank you, Lucy. This number is one piece of the puzzle. Keep the locket safe." Lucy looked confused but nodded. "Will you tell me what this is all about some day?" "Perhaps when the mission is complete," Walter replied with a twinkle in his eye. "For now, I must continue my journey. I have one more place to visit." "Where are you going next?" Lucy asked. "To Dublin," Walter said. "There's someone there who holds the final number." Walter thanked Lucy for her hospitality and left her home, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He took a taxi back to the airport and boarded a flight to Dublin. The city was bustling with activity, and Walter felt a sense of excitement as he arrived. He had been to many places in his life, but this journey felt different. It had a purpose, and he was determined to see it through. Upon landing in Dublin, Walter took a moment to absorb the lively atmosphere. The streets were full of people, the sounds of laughter and conversation mingling with the distant strains of traditional Irish music. Walter knew exactly where he needed to go. A small, old-fashioned bookstore in the heart of the city. The bookstore, called O'Malley's Books, was well known for its rare and antique collections. Walter had learned about it through his research. He had read about the owner, an elderly man named Seamus O'Malley, who was reputed to have an extensive knowledge of old artifacts and their histories. Walter entered the bookstore, the bell above the door chiming softly as he stepped inside. The shop was quaint and smelled of aged paper and leather. Shelves of books towered around him, creating a labyrinth of literary treasures. Seamus O'Malley, A man in his late 70s with a thick head of white hair and round spectacles perched on his nose looked up from the counter. He greeted Walter with a warm smile. "Good day, sir. Welcome to O'Malley's Books. How can I assist you today?" Walter approached the counter, returning the smile. "Good day to you, Mr. O'Malley. My name is Walter Davies, and I've come a long way to see you. I'm on a mission, and I believe you hold a piece of the puzzle I need to complete it." Seamus raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A mission, you say? Well, you've piqued my interest. What exactly are you looking for?" Walter pulled out the picture of the chest and handed it to Seamus. "I need a specific number. It should be on an old object, something you might have come across in your vast collection." Seamus examined the picture carefully, his expression thoughtful. "This is quite an interesting chest. It appears to be very old. I might have something that matches what you're looking for." He motioned for Walter to follow him to the back of the store, where he kept his most prized possessions. They walked through a narrow passageway lined with more books and artifacts, until they reached a small room filled with glass cases and locked cabinets. Seamus unlocked one of the cabinets and carefully removed a small, intricately carved wooden box. He placed it on a table and opened it, revealing a beautiful, ornate key. The key had a number engraved on its handle. 7. "This key has been in my family for generations," Seamus explained. "I always wondered what it might unlock. Perhaps it's part of the puzzle you're trying to solve." Walter's eyes lit up. "This is it. This is the final piece I need. Thank you so much, Seamus." Seamus smiled. "I'm glad I could help. What will you do now?" "I must return to Scotland and open the chest," Walter said. "It holds something very important, and I've spent many years trying to find these numbers." "Good luck to you, Walter," Seamus said, shaking his hand. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Walter left the bookstore, feeling a sense of accomplishment. He had found the final number, and now it was time to complete his mission. He boarded a flight back to Scotland, his heart pounding with anticipation. Upon arriving home, Walter went straight to his small cottage. He retrieved the chest from its hiding place under the floorboards and set it on the table. Taking a deep breath, he carefully entered the numbers he had collected. 5, 7, and the number from David's necklace, which was 3. With a soft click, the lock opened. Walter lifted the lid of the chest, revealing a collection of old letters, photographs, and a small leather-bound journal. Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized what he had found. These were the belongings of his long-lost family, a family he had never known. The letters were from his parents, written before he was born, detailing their hopes and dreams for their future together. The photographs showed a young couple, happy and in love. The journal was his mother's, filled with entries about her life and her love for Walter, who she never got to see grow up. Walter sat down and read through the letters and journal, tears streaming down his face. He felt a deep connection to the family he had always longed to know. This mission had been about more than just finding numbers. It was about discovering his roots and understanding where he came from. As he read, Walter felt a sense of peace wash over him. He knew that his parents had loved him deeply, even though they couldn't be with him. This knowledge filled the void in his heart that had been there for so long. Walter spent the rest of his days cherishing the memories of his family. He continued to live a kind and generous life, sharing his story with others and inspiring them to seek out their own roots. He had completed his mission, and in doing so, he had found the greatest treasure of all, a sense of belonging and love. Walter's journey had taken him far and wide, but it had ultimately led him back to where he started, with a heart full of love and gratitude. And so, the old man who had once lived alone in Scotland was no longer lonely, for he carried the spirit of his family with him always. Once upon a time, there was a man who lived in Scotland. The man was quite old. His name was Walter. Walter had never married. He had no children or family nearby. He had lived for many years alone, but he was very kind. He always treated everyone nicely. Walter had never travelled far. He had travelled around his home in Scotland, but he had not gone farther. Now it was time to act. He had a mission. Walter didn't have a lot of funds, but he was not poor. He had saved some money in his younger years. He planned to use that money for his mission. He must go to 3 separate places. He needed money for food, hotels, and travel. He had a mission, and he must complete it. First, Walter travelled to Edinburgh. A lot of people watched him as he passed by. He hadn't cut his hair in a long time. He had a long beard. His clothes were very strange as well. He looked a bit different on the streets of the big city. Walter arrived at the Meadows. It was a very large park in Edinburgh. It was full of people. Walter approached a young man. The man was about 25 years old. He was reading a local newspaper. He was sitting against a tree. He looked very calm. Walter sat down next to the man. "Good afternoon," Walter said. "Hello," answered the man. He looked at Walter suspiciously. Then he carried on reading. "How are you, David?" Walter said. The man looked up. He was very surprised. How did this strange person know his name? He looked at the old man carefully. "Did you say David?" he asked. "Yes, I did. How do you know my name?" "I can't tell you that." David stopped reading the newspaper. He looked at Walter, this time even more carefully. He looked at the long beard. He tried to imagine him with no beard, nothing. He had no idea who the old man was. "What do you want?" asked David. By now he was very suspicious. "Don't worry," said Walter. "I haven't come to harm you. I am here to tell you about something." "Go ahead," replied the man. "Tell me." Walter pulled a picture out of his pocket. In the picture there was a chest. It looked very old. It also looked like it might have something inside it. Something of value. "What's that?" David asked. "Don't you know what it is?" "It looks like a chest. I've never seen it in my life," Walter looked at David closely. Then he pointed to the picture. "Look at this." David looked. The chest had a lock. The lock had 3 zeros on it. "It's a lock." "Yes, and—" Walter continued. "The numbers are missing?" David questioned. "That's it," said Walter. "All 3 numbers are missing." He looked at David closely. "I need those 3 numbers for my mission," Walter said. "Mission? What mission?" "I can't tell you that," the old man replied calmly. David didn't understand. He had no idea what the man wanted. How could he give the man numbers he didn't know? Finally, Walter said, "I'm sure you've got one of those numbers. I don't know what you're talking about." "Think about it, David. You must have an old object. An object with a number on it." David thought carefully. He had no such object. He was sure of it. Then he remembered something. He did have one thing with a number. Maybe that was it? "Now that you mention it," he said excitedly, "I may have something. Wait here. I'll go and get it." "Where are you going?" asked Walter. "To my house. I need to get something. Wait, I'll come with you." David looked at the man suspiciously once again. The man was old. He seemed nice. He guessed it would not be a problem. "Okay," he said. "Follow me." David and Walter left the park. They went back along a small street. Then they took a bus to David's house. It was in a different part of town. While they traveled, David asked Walter, "What's your name?" "My name is Walter. Walter Davies." "And how long have you been in Edinburgh, Mr. Davies?" "Oh, please call me Walter. No need to be so polite." "Okay, Walter. How long have you been in Edinburgh?" "I've been here 2 hours." "Oh, really? That's not long." "Yes, but I like it. There are a lot of nice people and interesting sights here." "Yes, there are." The 2 men continued talking. Soon they reached David's house. The house was small and neat. David took Walter to the garage. David kept many things from his past there. He had things from when he was a boy. He had some old photos. He even had some old school notes. "What are we looking for here?" asked Walter. "I remembered something I have. It sounds like the object you're looking for." "An old object. With a number?" "Yes, an old object with a number." "Please wait a minute. I'm going to look." For half an hour, David searched. Walter tried to help. David asked Walter to sit down. He wanted to find it himself. After an hour, David finally found the object. "Look, Walter," he said with excitement. "I've found it." "What have you found?" Walter asked. He got up and walked over. He looked at David carefully. "How do you know it's what I need?" "I don't know, but I've had this for a long time, and it has a number." David unwrapped an old cloth. Inside was a gold necklace, and inside the necklace there was a number. "When you said you needed something with a number," David began, "I remembered this." "Do you remember who gave you that necklace?" asked Walter. "I'm not sure. I've had it since I was a baby." Walter smiled. He opened the garage door. "Where are you going?" David asked. "I'm finished here," replied Walter. "Remember that number. And read this." He handed David a letter. Then he walked away. "Wait, come back. Don't you want the necklace?" called David. But Walter was gone. He had disappeared through the doorway. Walter returned to central Edinburgh. He caught the train to the airport. His next stop was Northern Ireland. A few hours later, Walter arrived safely in Northern Ireland. The city of Belfast was full of people. There were many exciting things to do and see. But Walter had a mission. He knew just where to go. Walter called a taxi. He told the driver a local address. They agreed on a rate. It was in a faraway part of Belfast. After some time, he arrived at a large house. The house looked very expensive. The owner took good care of it. It was probably owned by someone rich. It had a very large garden. There were several dogs running around in it. The house even had a tennis court. Walter stood outside. He simply looked at the house for a while. Then he rang the doorbell. He rang again and waited for someone to answer. "Hello?" he called. Nobody came. No one seemed to be home. The old man looked around. He decided to wait. Walter pulled out the photo of the chest. He looked at it closely and smiled. He put the photo back inside his jacket. He waited some more. Walter heard a car approaching. As expected, it was an expensive car. There was a woman inside it. She wore big sunglasses. She didn't see Walter. The woman pressed a button. The garage door opened. She slowly drove in. She still didn't see Walter. The woman reached for the button again. She was closing the garage door. Walter might miss her. "Excuse me?" "Wait," called Walter. At last the woman saw Walter. She stopped immediately. The garage door remained open. "Yes?" "Who are you?" she asked. "Can I talk to you for a moment, please?" asked Walter. The woman looked at him suspiciously. She walked out of the garage. A butler came up from the garden. He looked at the woman and said, "Miss Murray, shall I take care of your car?" "Yes, Brian. Thank you. Miss Lucy Murray, am I correct?" asked Walter. "Yes, that's me." Lucy looked at Walter closely. "I've come to talk to you. It's important." "Important? If it's business, I can refer you to my office." "No, it's not business," replied Walter. "What could it be?" Lucy asked. Walter only smiled. "Well, whatever it is, come with me. Come into the house, please." Walter followed the woman inside. The house was very big. In fact, it was huge. It was also very beautiful. "Is this all yours?" asked Walter. "Yes," she answered. "I'm a professional designer." At age 19, I started a company. She paused and looked around. "What can I say? I've done very well. I can see that." "Wow! Must have done a lot of work." "Yes, I have worked very hard." She started walking again. "Come this way, please." Walter and Lucy went up some steps. They came to a large door. The door was wooden and very pretty. It was an old design. "Is your house very old?" asked Walter. Lucy smiled. "No, it's not, but it was built to an old design. I have very traditional tastes." Lucy opened the door. Walter looked around in surprise. It was a huge room. It was full of beautiful and expensive furniture. It was also very neat and clean. Brian the butler soon came in. He had brought afternoon tea. "Sir," said Brian. "Walter, please." "Walter, would you like something to drink?" "Yes, a cup of tea." Thank you." Lucy took off her jacket. It was a very hot day. Brian spoke to Walter again. "Let me take your jacket, sir." Walter took off his jacket. He handed it to the butler. Brian left the room and then quickly returned. He handed some hot tea to Walter. Then he left Lucy and Walter alone. Lucy and Walter sat down. They looked at each other. "Welcome to my home, Walter. May I ask why you are here?" Walter drank some tea. Then he set his cup on the table. "I need to know a number," he said calmly. Like David, Lucy was surprised. "A number?" she asked. "Yes, a number." "A specific number?" asked Lucy. "Yes, it would be on an object you have. Please make an effort to remember it." Lucy thought for a while.